Hello friends, it's almost Thanksgiving. Let's learn how to make 1-hour dinner rolls. Alright, so first thing our recipe tells us to do is grease a 9x13 pan. If yours is stone or glass, that's fine. I have aluminum. And I'm going to use parchment paper because I think it's easier. And I'm going to set that aside for now. I'd like to give credit for this recipe to heavenlyhomemakers.com. Now, first step of the recipe, after you grease or parchment your 9x13 oven-safe pan, is we're going to combine 1 cup of water, warm water, but not hot water. It has to be warm to the touch. 2 tablespoons of yeast. They say they used dry active yeast, which I also have. And 1/4 cup of honey. I use local raw honey. I just repurposed this bottle. It's easier to squeeze than the glass bottle, which is not squeezable. Had to bring out the big boy. Alright, give it a stir. If you're going to be using a mixer for this recipe, a stand mixer, you can just combine your water and yeast and honey right into the mixing bowl. But I'm going to be mixing by hand. I guess you could mix it in your mixing bowl either way, but I have mine in just my glass measuring cup. So we're going to let this sit for 15 minutes, and those 15 minutes are going to allow our yeast to bloom, and that means they're going to activate, and you will start to see bubbles on top of the liquid, and the yeast is going to give our rolls rise. So let's meet back in 15 minutes. We are back, and our yeast has blossomed. I'll be honest, mine was let set for a little more than 15 minutes, but that's where we're at. So now we're going to pour this into a large bowl. This will be where we will be mixing everything together and making our dough. Make sure you get all that goodness out of there. If you didn't have this mixture already in your bowl, you want all of that yeast, all of that leavener in your bowl. Okay. Now I have melted 1/3 of a cup of butter just in a microwave safe bowl in my microwave for about 30 seconds. And if you're not sure how much 1/3 of a cup of butter is, look on the side of your sticks of butter, and the paper that it's in shows you along the stick where 1/3 is. Okay. 1 large egg. And 1 teaspoon of sea salt. I'm sure regular salt is just fine. Remember, salt brings out flavor. It's okay if you want to use less, but don't leave it out completely. I'm going to make sure my egg yolk is broken up. We'll beat that a little bit. Now we are going to add the 3 to 3.5 cups of whole wheat flour. If you don't want to use whole wheat flour, you can use all-purpose. If you use all-purpose, I would cut the yeast you use in half to only 1 tablespoon. The reason this recipe called for more yeast necessarily compared to, say, an all-purpose flour roll recipe is because whole wheat flour is heavier. So remember to spoon your flour into your measuring cup. Don't pack it in, or else you will have too much flour and dry rolls. And no one wants that. 2, 3. The recipe does call for 3 to 3.5 cups. Always start with the smallest amount that they tell you to. You can always add more, but you cannot take any back. The climate you are cooking in will also impact how much flour you use. If it's winter, or if it's drier, which it tends to be in winter, the air is drier, and so your batter is more likely to be dry. If you're in a very humid environment, it's summer, you don't have air conditioning, and it's humid, your dough will tend to be more wet. So just because the recipe says 3 to 3.5 cups, if your dough is still too wet, go ahead and add more. So the recipe says this will be sticky, but this is still a little too sticky. It's very shaggy. So I'm gonna go ahead and add that 1/2 cup of flour in. If you're like, oh no, I added too much flour, just keep working it in. You can do this with just your hands or a wooden spoon. I have a spatula, or even a stand mixer with a paddle on it. Whatever you have, or whatever your preference is. Now, we're not kneading it. I'm just incorporating all that flour. Sometimes it's just easier to do with your hands. So like I said, the recipe said it'll be sticky but manageable. And it's sticky but manageable. So now we are going to cover it with a towel or a piece of plastic wrap and let it set for 10 minutes. It has been 10 minutes. Let's take a look. All right. It's risen a little bit. It has risen indeed. My Christian brothers and sisters out there will understand that pun. This bread is not quite as important, but if you're bringing it to Thanksgiving, it's important. So we are going to flour our surface, a clean surface. Because we don't want the dough to stick to your countertop. recipe says to form it into a ball, and we're going to divide it into 16 dough balls. The recipe says to place your individual dough balls onto a prepared baking sheet, but I'm using a 9x13 pan. I just like the look of them when they kind of cook together and then you get to peel them apart. I'm going to take my knife and use that to help me separate the dough ball. So it's 2, 4. Maybe you want to flour your knife as well. That's okay. And then each one of the 4 will be cut into 4. So take your quarters and cut them into quarters. It's okay if they're not exactly perfect, but try your best to get them the same size so that they all cook evenly. Getting a little crowded over here. If you have a bench scraper, that would be a good tool to cut these into their individual dough sizes. Okay, 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16. Sorry if you can't see the ones down here. So you're going to take your dough and tuck the bottom, just keep tucking the bottom under. Until you get a ball. It'll look like that on the bottom, but that's okay. And do that 16 times. Okay, so I realize I should have done 15, but we'll make them fit. So we are going to set these aside and cover them again with your towel or plastic wrap. And these are going to rest for 20 minutes. In the meantime, we're going to preheat our oven to 375 degrees. Okay. It's been about 20 minutes. And our rolls have risen a little bit. This poor little guy, I have to figure out. I'll probably just put him on a cookie sheet and bake him. These are gonna go into our oven, our 375 degree preheated oven, for 15 to 20 minutes or until they're golden brown on top. Would you look at those buns? Okay, these did go in for 15 minutes. They're a little brown on top. To make these even better, I would brush some melted butter on top. And if you like garlic, you can sprinkle some garlic powder on top. Or you could even do a honey butter and brush that on top. But let's give one of these a try. So they tear off really easily from one another. These are very hot. Hold on one second. There we go. Now you can look at them in all their glory. Do you see the steam? I hope you see the steam. But yeah, they rose well, especially for this recipe being 100% whole wheat flour. They're hot, but I have to try them out for you guys. They have a relatively mild flavor for a roll that is 100% whole wheat. And I think the 1/4 cup of honey has a lot to do with that. So don't skimp on the honey. But yes, super easy. You don't have to knead the dough, and homemade. You can brag on that to whomever is hosting your dinner party, or you can brag on it to your guests. But yeah, simple roll recipe that doesn't take much time, so you have a lot of other things to do on Thanksgiving. Don't let these be a hindrance. I'll link the recipe down below. If you give them a try, let me know how they turned out. How did you like them? If you have any comments, let me know down below. And I hope you have a great Thanksgiving, everyone. Cheers!